I'd like to call the meeting to order, and could I please have the roll call?
Councilmember Abdelgawad.
Here.
Councilmember Barber.
Present.
Councilmember Berenson absent. Councilmember Burke.
Present.
Councilmember Serko.
Present.
Councilmember Holman.
Present.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Present.
Councilmember Townsend.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Present. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We have no presentations or awards tonight, but next on our agenda is a personal appearance by Ron Winslow. Commercial code violations is his subject. Mr. Winslow, are you in the audience? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, please.
Ronald Winslow, 13613 12th Street, Grandview, Missouri. And I'm here to represent some friends of mine that they own China Star Restaurant. They just rent the building, but they get code violations all the time. And if I could just pass a copy to you.
Into the clerk. Yep.
I have one that I'll hold up here. But since I got 5 minutes, I'll try to keep it short. This is the north side of China Star Restaurant. There's like two, there's just one copy for all of it. If somebody
Oh, so just pass that on down. Take the whole thing and pass it down. Okay.
There's like 2 feet of grass, and the rest is the fence, and then the rest of it on the north side belongs to that. I imagine it's that family that they did eminent domain and took Walmart and everything, but they got a notice that says that they need to cut all that grass, and if you'll take a closer look at the picture, it's only 2 feet of their property. Everything else is the trees on that side, and they grow on this side. I went in for them and I tried to clean it out, but I thought maybe the city was going to tell this the property owner on the north side of the fence that his trees are growing over, but they didn't. So that's one item. And then what was it, about 6 months ago, when they did the streets and the sidewalks from Advanced Auto Parts all the way to 71, they put up big signs and about construction work, but they never took them down. Nobody ever took them down. But the city doesn't say anything about that, and there's weeds and everything growing up on there. But those sign is still there, and it's between the sidewalk and the street. Come over to the violation, the recent violation. What it was a couple months back, there was a tree that sits between the curb and the sidewalk, and it's right by Advanced Auto Parts, and it's dead. And there's branches that fall down all the time and stuff, but it's on the outside of the sidewalk if you look at the photographs, you can see the sidewalk, and it's next to the street. And so if it was to fall into a car going by or somebody walking down the sidewalk, there's probably a $3 million lawsuit. And who are they going to take in court? Every court in the country. It's how you present your case in court and the right people that you take to court. And I know they're going to go for the city, not the property owner. And the China Star Restaurant, when I brought it up and left it at the code enforcement office, the photographs, the person was supposed to call me. They didn't. And so about a month later, I came back up bringing another photograph of the dead tree and left my name and phone number again. They finally called me, and I said, they were talking about, well, we sent the owners of the property notice that the tree needs to be cut. And I said, no, To me, that's the city's responsibility because of where it's located, not the property owner. And like I say, you go to court, all you have to do is present it the right way. You put the sidewalk in. The property owner didn't want the sidewalk. You put the sidewalk in. So who owns the property? Okay, the signs, you can put...
Mr. Winslow, if I could interrupt a little bit. You're getting close to the end of your time there at the podium. Could you get to your point? What are you wanting to do?
They're
What do you want?
wanting to charge. They finally cut down the tree. They sent a notice before I had information on it. They sent a notice and they cut down the tree, and now they're wanting to send a bill to the China Star Restaurant for them to pay for the cutting down the tree. And I don't feel that's legal. And it's not the property owner's responsibility since if you'll look at the photograph, where the tree's located.
Okay, well, I will tell you, on having come from the law enforcement side of the city government, I will tell you that the people sitting along the table and by you are really the point of contacts you need to make. We, as the elected body, are policy makers, not enforcers. And so you really need to speak with these people that are down here, our staff, to try to sort out the details on that. I understand that you probably want to work as a representative for them. Do we have any kind of legal notice at this time? You know, those types of things. So we really can't act as an elected body on this particular topic. That is something that potentially you'd have to work out with codes enforcement and even a judge if you wanted to testify as a witness before the judge.
You can override the administration. All it is a code, and they're trying to say what it's the property owner's responsibility. You would have the safe.
You misunderstand. We do not have that overriding authority. That is the judge that has that overriding authority because it's now a ticket. It's a summons to appear in court.
You're not overriding. You're making a decision of whose that property belongs to. Either you're making a decision for the city of who the property.
Okay. Okay. I'm not going to argue with you anymore.
Right.
We understand your point on this, but you're going to have to work it out with staff on this.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Next item is staff reports. Mr. Fearborn.
Thanks, sir. I would ask Mr. Cataret to make a staff report for Development Services this evening.
Thank you, sir. I want to provide an update of the upcoming schedule of our Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. Tuesday, August 20th, the commission will have 2 public hearings on their agenda. One public hearing will be for the vacation of 2 small segments of right-of-way within the Remington subdivision. It's located where Hampton Drive crosses between Remington and Creekmore. When Remington was initially going through the phased platting, there were a couple of small segments of right-of-way that at the time had thought would actually be extended further north, and actually over into the Creekmore subdivision. But when Creekmore came in, those right-of-ways were not continued. So they're very small segments behind individuals' properties. And so we would like to go in, we've talked to the homeowners, there's 2 different landowners we're dealing with, to vacate the right-of-way and simply have that property transferred to those private property owners. When you see the map, it'll become very clear to you, but it's really an issue of just getting rid of right-of-way that doesn't need to be on the books. The second public hearing item is a request for rezoning. This is a request to rezone 25 acres of the Good Ranch down on the east side of Dean Avenue, just north of North Cass Parkway. Requested to rezone the property from agricultural to planned unit development. And the proposed intended use for the property would be a 204-unit attached single-family development. So that is scheduled for August 20th. And then on September 3rd, the commission has 1 public hearing. It'll be for consideration of the fiscal year 2020-2024 capital improvement program. So we'll have a presentation by staff on the CIP to the commission that evening. So those are the only items currently scheduled. That concludes staff report.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Hearing none. Mr. Fearborn?
Thank you, Mr. Cataret. I would ask Chief Zimmerman to make a report for the police department.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. With the start back to school, we felt like it was very timely to give some back to school safety tips. You've heard me say time and time again, if you see something, say something. We say that at every community meeting we go to. We say it every chance we get. But we also want to say, call 911. Often we deal with individuals who will post things on social media about suspicious activity or suspicious vehicles, which we don't, that's not monitored all the time, so we don't get that information in a timely manner sometimes. So I know that people will say, we didn't want to bother you. We didn't think that it rose to the level of calling 911. That's our job. People are not bothering us. We want people to call if they see a suspicious vehicle in their neighborhood that doesn't belong, or individuals, now that school is starting, hanging around bus stops that are not known to be in the area. We're also looking at training for bus drivers and also our trash haulers to make sure that they recognize suspicious activity, they recognize that something is going on in a neighborhood, perhaps that it's out of place. We also want our citizens to talk to their children about safe zones. Where is it safe to be? A police station, a police officer, a fire station, those places that they can go if somebody is around that they don't feel comfortable with. We also ask that parents designate a relative, a friend, a neighbor, someone to be at the residence or be in the area when the kids are getting off the bus and they're heading for home, that can keep an eye out for that kind of suspicious activity. We tell drivers, especially now that the kids are in school and they're walking or they're getting off of the buses, children often make really unexpected movements. They dart out from between cars. They chase each other into the street and things like that. So please, please, please slow down. That's obviously good advice, even during the summer months when kids are out playing. But now that kids are out on the streets and walking to school, we're asking folks to please slow down. And I will say to folks, we do school zone enforcement every morning and every afternoon, so we will be out there and we will write tickets. So, just to be aware of those school zones now that school is back in session. In preparation for talking with you all tonight, I met with Assistant Superintendent Brian Pettengill just to talk about the things that he would like for folks to know. And he said that the district is working on same-side drop-off, and I had to ask what that meant. They're trying to make their transportation bus routes so that the children don't have to cross the street after they exit the bus. They're just not able to do that in all locations. It's just not possible. And so he asked that, folks, our drivers, please obey the stop arms on the buses. Don't drive around them. Don't try and, get ahead of them, that sort of thing. Obviously, you all know, you were part of that. The SRO contract was renewed, and Officer Lance Goddard is continuing in that position. He's very popular at the schools and does all kinds of crazy things that we get on video sometimes. Assistant Superintendent Pettengill wanted you all to know, we do periodic responses to the schools. Our officers just drop in different times of the day, visit with the kids, sometimes have lunch, visit with the teachers. We are there at different times of the day, different schools, all that we're responsible for, and he wanted me to tell you all that they love that program. They love the fact that Raymore officers are in and out of the schools all the time. So I told him that I would be sure and pass that along. And then last but not least, we all participated in refresher training for active shooter with both Peculiar, the Raymore Police Department, and the entire school district with Strategos. So everyone has been refreshed in preparation for this new school year. So be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chief. Anyone? Mr. Holman?
Not a question, but a comment, probably more to Mr. Crass's point. I didn't get through any other school zones today, but I did drive in front of Creekmore Elementary, and I noticed, I assume it was our Public Works Department that was refreshing the stop lines there at the main entrance to the school. Perfect timing with the school coming up and starting on Wednesday, so thank you, sir.
Thanks. Anyone else? Chief, I had a question. I've seen a little bit of media coverage recently about some cities stepping up their bus stop enforcement for the buses and videoing violators of the stop arm. Has Apple Bus gotten any more aggressive at providing that information to us so those folks can be cited?
I don't have that information, sir, but I can sure find out.
Okay, I just didn't know if they were doing, you said, Brian's really good, Brian Petgill's really good about latest stuff that's going on out there, and I
Absolutely.
didn't know if he had talked to you about that yet or not, but Apple Bus would have to be the one to initiate that. I think they
initiate
were
that.
actually going to put a video on the sign so they could catch the approaching or passing car when the sign is out.
We've talked about stationary devices in order to capture, some of that, school zone enforcement type of thing. Not anything on the bus. He and I have
Right.
talked extensively about the cost of that, stationary camera system to capture that. But nothing on the buses, but I can sure check.
Well, I'm glad they're working at least on a policy on same side pickup and drop off.
Mm-hmm.
That would eliminate the danger of somebody running that sign, but thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
And all this information will be placed on social media just to remind folks of, how to be safe.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Anyone? Okay, Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Your Honor. Next week, August 19th, Monday, August 19th, I will be transmitting the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget for the City Council's consideration that evening. And just a reminder that the meeting will begin at 7 p.m. We've moved back to the 7 p.m. time frame. Obviously, one of my favorite nights of the year. That concludes staff reports, sir.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Fearborn? Okay. Move on to, we have no committee reports. We'll move on to the consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to dispose of all 3 items or pass the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as proposed to include item A, City Council minutes from the July 22nd, 2019 City Council meeting, item B, reappointment of Laura Richardson to the Arts Commission, and item C, reappointment of James Gribble to the Arts Commission.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Motion been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, please have the second reading of Bill 3475 by title only.
The second reading of Bill 3475 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Bright Construction, LLC for the Dean Avenue Meter Vault Project, City Project Number 19-899-501, in the amount of $65,838, and authorizing the city manager to approve change orders within established budget constraints.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3475, award of contract for the Dean Avenue Meter Vault Project.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Motion been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3475. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. Okay, please have the second reading of Bill 3477 by title only.
The second reading of Bill 3477 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing an amendment to the fiscal year 2019 capital budget to provide additional funding support for the Dean Avenue Meter Vault Project.
Thank you. As this is related to the previous item, I would entertain a motion to dispose of this item as well.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Bill 3477, fiscal year 2019 budget amendment for the Dean Avenue Meter Vault.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3477. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. We'll now move on to new business. Okay, please have the first reading of Bill 3482 by title only.
The first reading of Bill 3482 by title only, an ordinance pursuant to Section 67.110 of the Revised Statutes of Missouri, levying general and special taxes in the City of Raymore, Missouri for the year 2019.
Thank you. As this requires a public hearing, I will open the public hearing at this time and ask for a staff report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Finance Director Elisa Williams to make the report on this item.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. Before you this evening for your consideration is the 2019 tax levy. Each year, the city is required by the state auditor's office to calculate and set our tax levy. This requirement must be recorded with the county clerk no later than September 1st. In odd-numbered years, the assessor's office assesses properties to account for changes in value. We're currently in an odd year. The basic theory of the Hancock Amendment is that the city revenue from property tax in the general fund and the park fund should be revenue neutral from year to year for non-growth related increases in assessments. There is an allowance for inflation, and this year that rate is 1.9%, as provided by the state auditor. This means that typically as assessments from non-growth increase, then the levy will decrease. The opposite is true when assessed values decrease. The general fund revenue for 2019 is calculated to be 41.97 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. The park fund levy is calculated to be 11.30 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. The debt service levy is the same as last year at 71.70 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. The total tax levy is recommended to be 1.2497, which is $1.24.97 in total. This is a total decrease of 3.59 cents. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Win? Yes, Mr. Holman.
Very, very well done, Lisa. Thank you. What staff is proposing would amount to each individual taxpayer as a small tax decrease. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And we have held the line, this body has held the line on that levy, or we have reduced the tax rates, closing in on, I believe, our 14th or 15th year. Is that also correct?
That is correct. 13th year.
Thank you, sir. No more questions.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate it. Since this is a public hearing, I would entertain anyone from the audience to approach the podium to discuss this subject with the council. Try to give your name and address for the record. Try to keep your comments 5 minutes or less. I don't see anybody coming, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time, and I would entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3482, setting the 2019 tax levy at the amount listed by staff at $1.2497.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Motion been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3482. Any further discussion? Mr. Holman.
Just for those that are listening, not very many in attendance tonight, but there was great dismay by many when the assessor raised the assessment rates across the county. Just so you know, the Hancock Amendment, as explained by Lisa, basically has a remedy for that. So because our valuation in the city went up, the levy is going to roll back. People are actually going to see a tax decrease on their Raymore City portion of property taxes because of this. And Mr. Zer, did I say that correctly? Caught him sleeping.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Well, except that if your property value went up 10 grand or something like that, it's kind of a wash. It kind of balances things out. So could you explain that, please?
Thank you, Your Honor, for doing that with your hands.
I know, right?
Well, actually, because I do that with my hands. And Ms. Williams is probably laughing behind me because she was quoting the line I use each year earlier today. If you can imagine what I call a water balance each year, and you're plunging down on one side of the water, the other side isn't necessarily going to have to rise up. So it's all equal in any given year. You'll note within the ordinance, it's described as revenue neutral. So any given home in any given year is going to only have to pay the lesser of the increase in the assessed valuation, which this year, those high amounts amounted to an average of over 8%, or the lesser of that amount, the inflation amount, which Ms. Williams indicated was 1.9%, or a cap if both of those go out of sight of 5% in any given year. And you'll see that on, I believe, line 14 of Form A within your packet. So at any given time, it's meant to be revenue neutral for any of our property tax residents who are paying into that tax. So yes, next year those folks aren't going to have to pay anything more than they did, or this year, anything more than they did last year, with the exception of the tiny increase that's associated with inflation.
Thank you. Okay. I didn't want to give anybody the thought that we were decreasing taxes, they'd see a discount there, so. With that said, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Can I please have the first reading of Bill 3479 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3479 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into a street improvement reimbursement agreement with Hy-Vee, Inc. to construct a right turn lane for eastbound Foxwood Drive at its intersection with Fox Ridge Drive.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Cataret to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. For the past couple of years, city staff, engineering staff, have been studying the intersection of 58 Highway and Fox Ridge Drive, trying to come up with a plan to improve safety and functionality of vehicles that travel through the intersection. Currently, there's work being done on Fox Ridge Drive north of 58 Highway, which is part of that plan. That work's actually being done as a requirement of the Creekmore subdivision, where they were required to create a dedicated right turn lane. So they're currently working on a median that would readjust traffic patterns slightly in that area, but it allows for improved traffic flow for vehicles to have a dedicated right turn lane onto 58 Highway. On the actual 58 Highway traffic flow, the proposed 2020 capital improvement program includes a project where the city was planning to install a right turn lane for eastbound traffic on 58 Highway as it approaches Fox Ridge Drive. That's a real bottleneck area right now, with a lot of vehicles wanting to turn south onto Fox Ridge Drive, get to the school, get to all the subdivisions on the south side. This is an important project that the city felt needed to be funded. It's an expensive project because it does include requirements to move the traffic signal pole, which is a significant cost, as well as the underground utilities and actual construction of the turn lane. Hy-Vee came forward with its plan to do its new Fast and Fresh market on the southwest corner of that intersection. As part of their plan, they will be constructing 2 new public roadways. One will be on the west side of their store, and that roadway will actually line up with the entrance into the Willow Inn Shopping Center. Then they'll be constructing a road on the south side of their project site that would line up to the southern entrance to CVS. They were also required to make improvements to Fox Ridge Drive by adding a turn lane into their site and onto that new public roadway for anybody that's traveling south on Fox Ridge Drive. Again, our new developments, we want to be able to get turning movements out of the flow of traffic. So they're required to make those improvements. As we've done for other projects such as Sunset Lane and Fox Ridge Drive, if there's development occurring in the area, sometimes it's better to have one contractor on the site rather than multiple contractors. So we didn't want to have a situation where on Fox Ridge Drive, Hy-Vee's doing all their work and their new roads, that we got a city contractor working on 58 Highway doing our turn lane. So we'd like to propose a reimbursement agreement to have Hy-Vee's crews do all the work as part of their project. So at the time they're doing their work, they would construct the turn lane on 58 Highway. This really minimizes any disruption that would occur to traffic flowing through the intersection. Hy-Vee would be reimbursed up to $800,000 for this project, which is what we propose in the capital improvement programs to do, and that's to do just the city's portion of the project, which is that turn lane on 58 Highway. Again, the expenses related to that signal post, which is several $100,000, as well as the utility movements and the actual construction of the turn lane. The turn lane would start to the west of where the new public roadway will be. So that would allow vehicles that want to go on the new public roadway to turn off or continue straight through all the way to the actual intersection. The work is proposed to be completed. Hy-Vee intends to do construction in 2020, and the work would be done at that point of time. So staff does recommend approval of Bill 3479, the reimbursement agreement for the 58 highway turn lane. That concludes staff report.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Any questions? Mr. Holman?
I'm sorry, Mr. Carteret, understand exactly what you said. I may have missed this, but will the turn lane, as one is going south on Fox Ridge into the new Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh, will it extend all the way to the intersection, or will the cutout begin after you make the turn going south?
Cutout, it has been final design, but the cutout should be after you make the turning movement and then actually be a deceleration lane to the turn.
So we won't be widening the mouth of Fox Ridge on the south side then?
There will be some because of the widening of the turn lane, onto Fox Ridge Drive, but there'll still be a bump out if you would.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Barber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this makes a lot of sense. Thanks for bringing this to us. Just one question. I don't want to assume, but would economy of scales make, for us bringing this all together, is the potential of this being less expensive for the part we're doing than if we hired a separate contractor?
That could be a benefit of going this route. We have one contractor on site, expands their scope of work. It's a public project. They still pay prevailing wages and all the requirements as if we were doing the projects. It's simply reimbursing them for the actual cost. They'll have to submit their monthly, reimbursement request so we can verify actual cost. So we're only paying for that portion of the project that we were going to do anyways.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Anyone else? Mr. Fearborn?
If I could dovetail off of that, we did see with both the Johnson Drive extension, which that was another one that we had this sort of an agreement with, and with Fox Ridge, the primary cost savings were in there's not two mobilizations that take place, and those are expensive.
Thank you. Mr. Berenson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also think that it is a good idea. Will it also probably save us a little bit of time as well, too? Will this expedite that whole process?
It will, sir. The engineering work will be expedited and the actual construction work will be expedited, so it will save time.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One clarifying question, Mr. Carteret. You said this is reimbursement up to $800,000, so it could be less, potentially.
It potentially could be less, sir, yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, I would entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman?
I move that we approve Bill 3479, Foxwood Drive right turn lane reimbursement agreement.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I would second.
Thank you. Motion been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3479. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. Could we please have the first reading of Bill 3478 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3478 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, establishing a procedure to disclose potential conflicts of interest and substantial interests for certain officials and candidates for elective offices.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I would ask Ms. Warner to make a staff report on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. The Missouri law requires political subdivisions with operating budgets over $1 million to adopt an ordinance at an open meeting making public its method of disclosing potential conflicts of interest, which is the purpose of Bill 3478. The only officials required to file the financial disclosure statements for the coming year are the Chief Purchasing Officer and the Chief Administrative Officer, and those employees and elected officials who have a transaction in excess of $500 with the City of Raymore. That concludes my staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Jeannie? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve, or to approve the first reading of Bill 3478.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman?
I move that we approve Bill 3478, financial disclosure ordinance.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3478. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Okay, please have the first reading of Bill 3480 by title only.
The first reading of Bill 3480 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Central Salt LLC for supply delivery of bulk road salt.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Krass to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Well, it's middle of August. There was a heat advisory today, so let's talk a little bit about the upcoming winter. What you have before you this evening is a contract with Central Salt for bulk road salt. We have used them in the past. We do recommend award of the contract. That concludes staff report.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions of Mike? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of Bill 3480.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman?
I move that we approve Bill 3480, award of contract for bulk road salt.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3480. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Okay, please have the first reading of Bill 3481 by title only.
The first reading of Bill 3481 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Redford Construction Company for the Owen Good Force Main Project, City Project Number 19-326-201, in the amount of $563,180, and authorizing the city manager to approve change orders within established budget constraints.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Krass to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If council will recall, last year we received the final portion of the data for the assessment of the Owen Good Force Main. The condition assessment, this project arises from that. We will be making significant repairs to that at the locations shown on the attached maps. We do recommend award of contract to Redford Construction. That concludes staff report.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of staff? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of the first reading of Bill 3481.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman?
I move that we approve Bill 3481, award of contract for the Owen Good Force Main Project.
Thanks. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3481. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. That concludes our new business. We'll now move on to public comments. If anyone would like to address the council tonight from the public, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. No one? It's a big crowd. All right, we'll move on to mayor council communication, and I will start with Mr. Jacobson this evening. Mr. Jacobson, y'all ready?
I think I am, sir. Okay. Thank you. It's kind of a curveball there, but I'll try to do what I can. Really, not a whole lot. I do want to say that really appreciate Chief's comments on the bus safety coming up and some of the things that you're doing in terms of training bus drivers and trash drivers to look for suspicious behavior. If I recall, in our survey recently, we were rated #1 in terms of safety, and I think that's always #1 in any community. So, Chief, kudos to you on that. And I love hearing about that. Probably the other, the only other thing I'll comment on is I know there's not anybody here this evening doing any public appearances, but I did want the people in my ward to know that I have received several of their emails concerning the upcoming proposed development along Dean Avenue. I have actually been out of town and been away from the computer, so apologize for not answering those yet. I do answer all emails and calls, and I will be doing those here over the next couple of days. I just want to know that. That concludes my comments, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Burke.
I was not ready, but I am now. I think all I have is for all the parents and students in the city, welcome back to school. And I've talked to some teenagers in my house and said it's time to start getting your stuff ready, start to take your responsibilities seriously again. and the main thing is get some sleep. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just reflect on the same thing about schools, safety of the children. I got a couple of granddaughters still go to school here. They do ride the bus. So it's always pertinent that we always watch out for our kids, especially with school season starting. So thank you for pursuing this and making it safer for these children, because I know sometimes they cross the street, they cross a corner, and it's always scary because you don't know who's driving. So if they can get that more established to keep these kids safer from back and forth, it's a really nice gesture and a good working atmosphere for the children. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing this evening.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank our citizen volunteer, Laura Richardson and James Gribble on the Arts Commission. Thanks again for serving on the city. As I said, our city couldn't run without our citizen volunteers, and everybody's important. And I know the Art Commission has a lot going on, and look forward to seeing what they have for us in this coming new year. And Chief, I appreciate your report about school bus and school and safety, and my crash, your department taking care of the stop. It's important. I do have, my youngest is now a freshman in high school, so I promise I will warn everybody when she starts driving, but it kind of leads that, yeah, there'd be a little more traffic in the morning, a little more traffic in the early afternoon, and sometimes people are behind and they're running late, and we got some new kids that are driving for the first time going to school, so everybody keep your eyes open, be patient, and certainly if somebody does run around a school bus, you can get a license number and call that in and turn them in. And I know my office is out in front of 58, and I see that done all the time right there, and I just cringe when I see that happen. But be on the lookout. There'll be more kids running around and more parents taking them to school. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Holman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Two things. First of all, thank you for clarifying my comments from earlier. I was at least technically correct. We are lowering the tax rate, but the end result may be, as you stated, a wash because your valuation went up. So I was technically correct. I was not thorough enough, and I apologize for that. And just one other point. We don't have really the opportunity to address someone who comes up and makes a public appearance, but I run into this misperception, if you will, many times of where, quote, an individual property owner's property ends and begins, and there is this kind of urban legend, if you will, that anything beyond the sidewalks is the city's, and right-of-way means that that's city property, they own that. Well, that's not correct. First of all, it would take a survey to determine exactly where one's property begins and ends, but typically you would go out to the edge of the curb. The city maintains right-of-way or easement rights on that for utility purposes and things like sidewalks and widening of road. It's still the individual landowner's property, and they have the same responsibilities as they do in the front yard of their house. They have to mow and maintain that. They have to cut down dead trees that are falling on roads, but there seems to be a number of citizens and other people out there, even citizens from other communities like Grandview, that tend to believe that. So for all 5 watching on the television tonight, and perhaps Lori can educate the rest of them through the newspaper, but yeah, it is your property, and yes, you do have to mow it and maintain it. That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Abdelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Holman, thanks for clarifying that, too. That's a point well made. I was still a little fuzzy on the tax levy. If I understand this right, so your taxes should be the same, but if they go up, Mr. Holman will pay the difference? Is that, am I on the record for that? Okay. No, thanks for clarifying the other, though. I do want to thank city staff for their presentations tonight as well. Ms. Williams, thank you. And lastly, Mike, so we ordered this salt tonight, and we approved this. Are we taking an over and under on how long this is going to last? Sorry. I know I jinx this every year, and I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chief, I also want to thank you for the presentation tonight. I'm like you. I think sometimes the term see something, say something kind of has become so common. that we've gotten a little complacent about that, and that people have a tendency to write it off. Oh, I'm not going to bother the police. But oftentimes, when talked to later on, they could have provided valuable information at the time that might have either stopped the event from occurring or caught the individuals that were responsible for it. So I too want to echo that on the see something, say something. And, you know, since we've had our last council meeting, we've had 2 tragic events, one in Dayton, Ohio, one in El Paso, and even some crazy stuff going on down at a Walmart in Springfield that gets people really concerned about what's going on around them. And we all, in this day and age, have a responsibility to kind of keep your head on a swivel. And when you do see something out of order, say something, because the police can intervene, and oftentimes have in the past on occasions where a responsible individual has called us and we've gotten there in time to prevent anything from occurring. And so I wanted to reemphasize what the chief said, that calling 911 is not a burden on us. It is actually what we want as a police department, to get that information early and to be able to evaluate it and work with it. So again, I appreciate that emphasis on that, and I too wish to emphasize that as well. And that's really all I have this evening. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, staff, for a great job, and thanks to our individual volunteers for serving on our commissions again. It's great to have good people in the community willing to step up. And with that, we do not have a reason to go into executive session, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Holman.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn this meeting of the City Council.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
All those in favor? We are adjourned. It's unanimous. Thank you.